I always thought the moment a man discovers his wife's betrayal would be loud, shouting, broken dishes, maybe even a dramatic confrontation. But when I found out, it was silent. Eerily silent. Like the calm before a storm that no one else sees coming. I was sitting in my car outside the house, our house, the one we had been saving for, planning for, the one she obsessed over down to the last detail. A house she insisted would be the foundation of our future. And yet, inside that very house, my wife was betraying me. The irony tasted bitter, but it also gave me clarity. I wasn't a fool. I'd seen the signs. The sudden late nights, the extra effort in her appearance, the way she guarded her phone like it held nuclear codes. But I wasn't the kind of man who acted on impulse. No, I was methodical. And so, I waited. I planned. I let her dig her own grave, deeper with every text, every whisper, every pathetic excuse she thought I believed. That night, I had installed a hidden security camera system, something she didn't know about. She was too busy gushing over furniture catalogs and Pinterest boards to notice a few extra wires in the walls. So when she sent me a message saying she had a work emergency and wouldn't be home until late, I already knew she was lying. I sat in my car, phone in hand, watching the live feed. And there they were. The man, some generic gym bro type, all muscles and no substance, stood in my living room, the one I had paid for. His shirt was already off before she even locked the door. My wife? Smiling, laughing, running her hands over his chest in the same way she used to touch me. I could have stormed in. I could have made a scene, shouted accusations, watched them scramble like cockroaches under the glare of a kitchen light. But that's what an ordinary man would do. And I was far from ordinary. Instead, I watched. Not out of masochism, not because I wanted to torture myself, but because every second of this would fuel what came next. Every careless giggle, every stolen kiss was ammunition. My wife had made one mistake bigger than her affair. She had put everything in my name. The mortgage, the utilities, even the expensive renovations she insisted on. She wanted a dream home, but didn't want the financial responsibility of it. She had manipulated me into carrying that burden, thinking it was a sign of love. And now? Now, it was my greatest weapon. By the time they stumbled upstairs, I had already set my plan in motion. A few taps on my banking app, joint credit cards? Frozen. Access to our savings? Disabled. I even sent a quick email to the bank, notifying them of suspicious activity on our mortgage payments. Nothing catastrophic yet, just enough to start the domino effect. And then, I drove away. Not out of weakness, but because I wanted her to feel secure for just a little longer. I wanted her to wake up in the arms of her lover, completely unaware that the world she had built for herself was already crumbling beneath her feet. Let her have tonight. Tomorrow, the real fun begins. Looking back, my life before the betrayal felt almost too perfect. The kind of perfect that, in hindsight, makes you wonder if you were just too blind, too comfortable, too trusting. But at the time, it felt real. Stable. A life built brick by brick, with patience, effort, and love. Mornings started the same way they always did. My wife, Emily, was an early riser. She'd wake up before me, shuffle downstairs, and by the time I walked into the kitchen, the smell of coffee filled the house. She always made mine exactly the way I liked it, strong, no sugar, just a little milk. She'd sit at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, still wrapped in her oversized robe, her hair in a messy bun. I'd lean down, kiss her temple, and she'd give me a sleepy smile, murmuring something about how much she hated mornings. That was our routine. Simple, comfortable, familiar. After breakfast, I'd head to work. A steady job in finance, nothing glamorous, but it paid well, and more importantly, it gave us security. I wasn't a man who needed much. I never cared for expensive watches or flashy cars. My priority had always been us, our future, our stability. Emily, though, she was different. She had big dreams, and I admired that about her. She wanted the kind of life you see in magazines, a perfect home, extravagant vacations, designer everything. And I wanted to give that to her. I wanted to be the man who made her dreams come true. That's why, when she found the house, I didn't hesitate. She had spent months searching, obsessing over every detail. She wanted something modern but warm, spacious but cozy, with a big yard and an open floor plan for entertaining, she'd say with a sparkle in her eyes. When she finally found the one, I remember the way she looked at me, hopeful, excited, expectant. "This is it," she had whispered, squeezing my hand. "This is our future." And so, I made it happen. I handled the mortgage, the paperwork, the endless back and forth with banks and realtors. I made sure we got everything she wanted. And when we finally moved in, Emily was glowing. She spent weeks decorating, choosing the perfect furniture, picking out color schemes. Every night, she'd show me Pinterest boards and Instagram accounts, giddy with excitement over the life we were building. At the time, it made me happy, seeing her happy. But looking back, there were signs. Subtle, easy to overlook, but they're nonetheless. Like the way she had started spending just a little too much time at the gym. At first, I encouraged it. She had always been into fitness, and I was proud of her dedication. But then, she started coming home later and later. The classes run late, she'd say, brushing it off with a quick kiss before disappearing upstairs to shower. Or the way she guarded her phone. She had always been attached to it. Social media, work emails, messages from friends. But then came the changed passwords, the sudden need to keep it face down on the table. It's just a habit, she had laughed when I jokingly pointed it out. You're being paranoid. And then, there were the business trips. She worked in marketing, and occasional travel was part of the job. But suddenly, the trips became more frequent, more last minute. And they always seemed to fall on weekends we had planned together. I promise I'll make it up to you, she'd say, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek before rushing out the door, suitcase in hand. I had believed her. I had believed in us. Because why wouldn't I? We had everything. A beautiful home, good careers, a future that seemed bright and secure. I had never been the jealous type, never the kind of man who questioned every late night or unread message. I trusted her. And that was my mistake. Because while I was building our future, she was already tearing it apart. It started with something small, almost insignificant. The kind of thing that, on its own, wouldn't set off alarms. Emily had always been someone who thrived on structure. She had her routines, morning workouts, coffee at her favorite spot, work, then home. If she ever made plans with friends, I knew about them in advance. Not because she had to tell me, but because she always wanted to. She'd send me texts throughout the day, little updates, pictures of what she was eating, complaints about work. It was just us. How we were. And then, one evening, she didn't come home when she usually did. It wasn't a big deal at first. She had mentioned something about a client meeting running late. I had made dinner, expecting her to walk through the door any minute. But as the hours ticked by, my phone stayed silent. No text. No update. Just nothing. By the time she finally walked in, it was nearly 10 p.m. She looked surprised to see me still awake. "Oh," she said, dropping her bag by the door. "You're up." I raised an eyebrow. Of course I was up. It wasn't like her to disappear for hours without a word. "Late meeting?" I asked casually. She nodded, already moving toward the kitchen. "Yeah, sorry. It ran way over. You know how these things are." Except I didn't. Emily had been at her job for years. Her meetings never ran this late. And even if they did, she would have said something. A quick text. A call. But now, she was acting like it was normal. Like I was the strange one for questioning it. I watched as she poured herself a glass of water, not meeting my eyes. "You didn't text," I said. I was starting to worry. She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "You're cute when you're paranoid." That should have been the end of it. A harmless exchange, a silly misunderstanding. But something in her tone didn't sit right. She wasn't being affectionate. She was being dismissive. It was subtle, so subtle that if I hadn't known her as well as I did, I might have brushed it off. But that was the thing. I didn't know her. I knew when she was tired. I knew when she was annoyed. And I knew when she was lying. Still, I didn't push. Not yet. Instead, I watched. Over the next few weeks, the small things started piling up. She became more protective of her phone. She used to leave it lying around, face up, notifications popping up freely. Now, it was always face down. Always locked. And when I walked into the room, she'd tilt the screen away, just slightly, as if on instinct. Her schedule changed, too. The gym sessions got longer. The client dinners became more frequent. And when she came home, she wasn't the same. She wasn't distant in the obvious way, not cold or angry. No, she was too normal. Too affectionate. Kissing me just a little longer, asking about my day with too much enthusiasm, like she was compensating. Like she was trying to keep me from noticing the cracks. And maybe, if I had been a different kind of man, I would have confronted her right then and there. But I didn't. Because I didn't confront problems without proof. So, I waited. I listened, and I started paying attention to the details she thought I'd ignore. Because whatever was happening, it wasn't just in my head. That was no longer an option. I knew something was wrong, and I wasn't the kind of man to sit around hoping the truth would reveal itself. No, if there was something to uncover, I would find it. I didn't act impulsively. I didn't explode with accusations. Instead, I started watching, listening, collecting the pieces she thought she had hidden. If she wanted to play games, I would play too, but I'd play smarter. The first thing I noticed was the phone. Emily had always been attached to it, but now it had become an extension of her hand. The moment she walked through the door, it was in her grip. If it wasn't, it was face down on the counter or tucked into her pocket. She used to scroll through Instagram openly, showing me posts, laughing at dumb memes. Now, when I was near, the screen stayed dark. Notifications were cleared before I could see them. She had changed her lock screen passcode, a small detail, but one that confirmed what I already knew. People don't change passwords unless they have something to hide. Then, there were the gym sessions. I had always supported her dedication to fitness. She loved her workouts, and I never questioned her need for that space. But now, her sessions lasted longer. An hour became 2, then 2.5. She started stopping for smoothies afterward, or running quick errands that somehow stretched her return home until well past dinner. The timing was too convenient. One night, I casually asked, "How was the gym?" She froze for half a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed it, but I did. It was the briefest hesitation before she answered, her voice a little too cheerful. "Good. Hard session today. I'm exhausted." I glanced at her bag, still zipped shut, no visible gym clothes inside. "What workout did you do?" She blinked, then smiled, shaking her head. "Oh, you wouldn't know. Just a mix of things." That was the moment I knew she was lying. She had always been specific about her workouts, complaining about certain exercises, detailing her progress. Now, she was vague, evasive, but I didn't press. Not yet. Instead, I started testing her stories. One evening, she told me she was meeting a coworker for drinks after work. I nodded, kissed her goodbye, and then did something I had never done before. I checked her car's location through the GPS tracking app we had both installed when we bought the car. A safety feature, she had called it back then, laughing about how it was good to keep tabs on each other. Now, it served a different purpose. She wasn't at the bar she had mentioned. Her car was parked near a residential area, one I didn't recognize. Not a restaurant. Not a gym. A house. I didn't rush there. I didn't text or call. Instead, I took a deep breath, let the information sink in, and closed the app. Because now, I had proof that she was lying. And if she was lying about that, she was lying about everything else. The next few days, I let her dig herself deeper. I started keeping track of her excuses, mapping out the inconsistencies. One night, she came home with her hair styled differently than when she had left. Another time, she claimed she had been at work late, but her work email, one I still had access to, showed no sent messages past 5 p.m. The lies were small, but they were piling up, forming a pattern. She must have sensed something shifting, because suddenly, she became more affectionate, more attentive. She started bringing me coffee in bed, kissing me a little longer in the mornings, asking me about my day like she truly cared. It was an act, I knew it. She wasn't being loving. She was covering her tracks, testing to see if I suspected anything. I played along. I smiled. I kissed her back. I told her I loved her, just like always. Because the longer she thought she was safe, the bigger her mistakes would be. And I was waiting for the one mistake she couldn't take back. It happened faster than I expected. I had prepared myself for the slow unraveling of the truth, for the game of patience I had been playing to drag out a little longer. But fate had a way of giving you exactly what you needed when you were ready for it. And I was more than ready. It was a Friday evening. Emily had told me she'd be working late, another client meeting, another excuse. I had stopped asking for details. I let her believe I was the oblivious husband, the trusting fool she had been playing for months. In reality, I was already 10 steps ahead. That night, I didn't track her car. I didn't check her location or try to piece together her lies. I didn't have to. The truth came to me on its own. A message popped up on my phone while I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a drink. It was from one of my closest friends, Matt. "Hey, man. I don't know how to tell you this, but I just saw Emily at La Riviera. And she's not alone." La Riviera. A high-end restaurant, The kind we only went to for anniversaries or special occasions. She had told me she was still at work. My fingers tightened around the glass, but my mind stayed clear. No racing heart, no clouded emotions. Just a cold, focused understanding that this was it. The moment I had been waiting for. I replied simply, "Who's she with?" Matt's response was almost immediate. "Some guy. Tall, gym rat type. They're sitting in a corner booth. It doesn't look like a business dinner, man." Of course, it didn't. I should have been angry, furious. But as I stood there, looking at the words on my screen, all I felt was control, power. Because now, I had what I needed. Now, I had the final piece. I didn't rush out the door. I didn't drive to the restaurant in a blind rage, demanding an explanation. That's what she would have expected. That's what any normal man would do. But I wasn't normal, not anymore. Instead, I calmly took my time. I grabbed my laptop, logged into our shared phone account, and pulled up her call history. A number had been appearing frequently, not saved under a name, just digits. I copied it, ran a quick search, and found what I was looking for: his name, his workplace, everything. So that's him. Then, I opened the security app connected to the cameras I had installed in the house, the ones Emily didn't know about. I went through the footage, watching the night she had come home late. I found it almost immediately. The first time he had been here, standing in my living room. The way they kissed like they had done it 100 times before. The way she led him upstairs, into our bedroom. I exhaled slowly, absorbing the image on the screen. I had known. Deep down, I had known all along. But seeing it? That was different. That was real. A slow smirk curled at the corner of my lips. She really thought she could get away with this. I closed the laptop, picked up my phone, and sent Matt one last message. "Thanks. Don't say anything to her. Just let me handle it." And I would. Because now, it was my turn to play. Revenge wasn't about rage. It wasn't about throwing a fit or lashing out in some dramatic display of anger. No, real revenge was precise. It was calculated, methodical, designed to hit where it hurt the most. And Emily had made it easy for me. She had given me everything I needed to destroy her without even realizing it. I sat in my office, a drink in one hand, my mind racing through every possible angle. I could expose her publicly, humiliate her, let the world see her for what she really was. But that was too simple, too fleeting. She'd cry, she'd apologize, and in a few months, she'd rebuild. No, I wanted something permanent, something she couldn't recover from. I opened my laptop and pulled up our financial records. The house, her dream home, the one she had begged for, obsessed over, was in my name. She had wanted the security of a house without the responsibility of paying for it. She had insisted it made sense, that I should handle the mortgage, the legal documents, the bills. And now, that decision was about to cost her everything. First, I contacted the bank. With a few simple moves, I arranged to halt mortgage payments under the guise of financial restructuring. I knew exactly how long it would take before the bank would start sending foreclosure notices, just enough time for the walls to close in around her. Next, I accessed our joint accounts. Or rather, my accounts. Emily, in her arrogance, had trusted me to handle all the finances. She had no idea how little control she actually had. I withdrew my share of the savings, moved assets into accounts she couldn't touch, and cut off her credit cards. By the time she noticed, she'd be living on whatever scraps were left in her personal account, which, knowing her spending habits, wouldn't last long. Then, I crafted my message carefully. I wasn't just going to walk away. I wanted her to feel it, to understand exactly how deep her betrayal had cost her. I wrote a letter, cold, professional, without a trace of emotion. "Emily, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't bother calling. I've already blocked your number. You've been lying to me for months. I know everything. The late night, work meetings, the gym excuses, the man you've been sneaking around with. You thought you were smart. You thought you were careful. But you were never careful enough. Since you've already moved on in every way that matters, I figured it was time I did the same. I've taken back what's mine. The house? It's under foreclosure. You should probably start looking for somewhere else to live. Our savings? Gone. Your credit cards? Canceled. Your perfect little life, built on my trust and my money, just disappeared overnight. I won't be there when you come home. I won't be there for the tears, the apologies, the excuses. You made your choices. Now you live with them." I scheduled the email to send exactly 5 minutes before she got home. Just enough time for her to walk through the door, expecting another night of deception, only to find an empty house and a future crumbling in real time. And then, for the final blow, I made one last move. Emily had always cared about appearances, about being admired, envied. She had carefully curated an image of the perfect wife, the woman who had it all, a successful marriage, a dream home, a man who adored her. She thrived on the validation. So, I made sure to strip that away, too. I gathered the security footage, the night she had brought him into our home, the proof of her betrayal in the very space she once called sacred. I compiled the clips, edited them together with the receipts, the call logs, the lies. And then, with one click, I sent it to her parents, her closest friends, and even a few coworkers she had bragged to about our perfect marriage. No message. No explanation. Just the truth, laid bare for them to see. By the time she realized what had happened, she wouldn't just be heartbroken. She'd be ruined. And I'd be long gone. Free. Let her pick up the pieces. If she can. The house was empty when I left. No lingering traces of my presence, no last-minute hesitations. Everything had been planned with precision. By the time Emily walked through that front door, expecting another evening of comfortable lies, she would step straight into the wreckage of her own making. I parked a few streets away, just far enough to remain unseen but close enough to witness the moment her world collapsed. It was almost poetic, watching the woman who had built her entire identity on control, on manipulation, finally lose everything in a single, calculated strike. Her car pulled up right on schedule. I watched as she sat in the driveway, oblivious to the reality waiting inside. Maybe she was texting him, making excuses, weaving another web of deceit. It didn't matter anymore. The moment she unlocked that door, her carefully curated life would disintegrate before her eyes. I imagined the sequence of events unfolding inside. The eerie silence of an empty house, the absence of my usual greeting. She would call my name at first, thinking I was just in another room. Then, she'd notice the missing furniture, the half-packed suitcases that once belonged to me, not us. Panic would settle in as she reached for her phone, only to realize I had already cut her off. No calls. No messages. Just the cold void of disconnection. Then, the email would arrive. I had scheduled it down to the exact minute. I could almost picture her face as she read the words, the slow comprehension sinking in like poison. The realization that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't something she could talk her way out of. This was the end. But that was just the beginning. A few moments later, her phone would buzz again. Not from me, but from the people whose opinions she valued most. Her family. Her friends. The people she had spent years crafting an image for. One by one, they would see the truth, the footage, the evidence, the undeniable proof of who she really was. The woman who had smiled in their faces while betraying the very man who had given her everything. I wondered how long it would take before she realized she had no escape. Would she try to call her lover? Would she beg him to help, to pick up the pieces of the disaster she had brought upon herself? And what would she do when she discovered that I had already sent him a message too? Not out of anger. Not out of desperation. Just pure, strategic calculation. She told me I was paranoid. Thought I'd never find out. But I did. And now, I'm letting you know what kind of woman you think you have. I didn't need to say anything else. Let him deal with the fallout. Let him decide if the woman he thought was exciting, rebellious, and passionate was still so desirable now that her entire world was crashing down around her. I sat there for a few more moments, watching, waiting. There was no need to see her reaction firsthand. I already knew what it would be. The desperation. The frantic attempts to salvage the wreckage. The calls that would go unanswered. The texts that would be ignored. By morning, her dream home would no longer be hers. By the end of the week, her financial stability would be gone. And by the time the dust settled, she wouldn't just have lost me. She would have lost everything. And that was the difference between us. She had thought betrayal was a game. She had treated our marriage like a playground for her indulgences, convinced she would never face the consequences. But I didn't play games. I ended them. The moment she realized, truly realized, was everything I had envisioned. It wasn't the confusion at first. No, that was too easy. When she stepped into the house and saw the emptiness, she probably thought it was a mistake. Maybe a break-in. Maybe I had packed some things for a trip. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Then she checked her phone. The email hit first. I imagined the way her face must have drained of color as she read every cold, calculated sentence. No emotion, no theatrics, just facts. Just the reality of her own actions staring back at her in black and white. Then, one by one, the messages started pouring in. Her mother, her sister, her closest friends. The people she thought were her support system. People who, up until 5 minutes ago, had believed in the version of Emily she had so carefully crafted. A devoted wife. A good person. The woman who had it all. I saw the first call come through on my screen. I let it ring. Then another. And another. The desperation set in fast. She was scrambling now. The controlled, composed version of herself, the one she had spent years perfecting, was unraveling. I could picture it. The way her hands probably shook as she tried to text me. The uneven breaths. The way her voice cracked as she left voicemail after voicemail, each one more frantic than the last. I let them pile up, unread. And then, finally, I answered. Where are you? Her voice was raw, panicked, a perfect contrast to my silence. What is happening? Why is everyone? You know why, Emily. My voice was calm, measured, the way hers used to be when she fed me lie after lie, expecting me to believe every word. A pause, then a choked breath. This is insane. I don't know what you think you will. I don't think. I know. Another silence. A heavy one. That was when it really hit. She wasn't in control anymore. Please, she whispered. The arrogance was gone. The fake confidence, the excuses, all of it had crumbled. Just let me explain. You already did. No, I didn't mean to. I almost laughed. Didn't mean to? As if it had been an accident. As if she had tripped and fallen into another man's bed. You meant every choice, Emily. My voice was still steady, still emotionless. And now, you get to live with them. I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel it. The helplessness. The void. The same way I had felt it when I sat in that car, watching her with him. The way I had felt it when I saw the late-night messages, the excuses, the little lies she had crafted so effortlessly. Where am I supposed to go? She finally asked, her voice small. Not I'm sorry. Not I messed up. Just where am I supposed to go? Like she was still looking for a way out. That's not my problem anymore. And then I hung up. I blocked her number. Her messages, her desperate attempts to claw her way back. None of them would reach me. I didn't need to hear the apologies she didn't mean. I didn't need to listen to the half-hearted attempts at justifying the unjustifiable. She had built her world on my trust. And now, that world was gone. And I was finally free. The aftermath unfolded exactly as I had planned. No sudden redemption arcs, no dramatic reconciliations, just a slow, brutal collapse of everything she had once held dear. Emily had spent years crafting an illusion, a carefully curated version of herself that relied on admiration, validation, and control. And now, with a few well-placed moves, I had stripped it all away. The first cracks appeared in her social circle. Friends she once called loyal suddenly became distant. No one wanted to be associated with a woman whose betrayal had been exposed so publicly. The carefully chosen Instagram-perfect friendships dissolved overnight. I had made sure the truth reached the right people, the ones who valued loyalty, who despised deception, the ones who would never look at her the same way again. Her family was next. I didn't have to say anything. The footage spoke for itself. Her parents, who had always prided themselves on values and integrity, were humiliated, disgusted. The call stopped. The support vanished. The golden daughter they had once boasted about was now a source of shame. And then, there was her career. Marketing is all about reputation, image, trust. And Emily had thrived in that world, presenting herself as sharp, reliable, the kind of person who could handle any crisis. But no company wants an employee whose personal scandals become public disasters. I had sent the evidence discreetly, just enough to make sure the right people saw it, the higher-ups, the ones who made decisions. It didn't take long before the whispers started, the uncomfortable meetings, the sudden coldness from colleagues who once treated her like a star. A week later, she was let go. Not fired outright, of course. That would have been too simple. Instead, she was given the corporate equivalent of exile, a mutual decision, a quiet exit with no fanfare, no recommendations, no future prospects. A career she had spent years building, gone in an instant. As for the house, the dream home she had once adored, she barely had time to pack her things before the bank took over. The foreclosure moved faster than she expected. Her name wasn't on the paperwork, after all. She fought, tried to negotiate, but there was nothing she could do. No financial safety net. No secret savings. Nothing. She called me once, A number I didn't recognize, but I knew it was her. I let it ring. Let her sit with the silence. And me? I was better than ever. Without Emily, without the weight of her lies and deception, I thrived. My career flourished. I took the money I had secured before the fallout and invested it wisely. I traveled. I reconnected with old friends, with family. I built a life that was mine, not one I had to constantly maintain for someone else's benefit. The last I heard, she was staying with a distant relative, barely scraping by. No job, no status, no home. The woman who once believed she was untouchable, who thought she could have it all without consequence, was now just another cautionary tale. And I walked away from it all. Not broken, not bitter, just victorious. Life has a way of balancing the scales. Some people think they can move through it without consequences, that they can take and take without ever giving back, without ever paying the price. Emily was one of those people. She thought she had me figured out, thought I'd be like every other man, angry, broken, begging for answers. But I don't beg. I don't give second chances. I don't play games unless I'm the one writing the rules. And in the end, she wasn't just caught. She was outplayed. I never saw her again after that final call, but I didn't need to. The last remnants of her life, the ones she had built on my trust, were gone. No home, no career, no reputation to cling to. Whatever she was now, wherever she ended up, it wasn't my concern. She had made her choices, and I had simply ensured she felt the full weight of them. And me? I moved on. Not in a rush, not in desperation, but on my terms. I didn't let what happened define me, didn't let it make me bitter. If anything, it sharpened me, made me more aware, more deliberate. I knew what kind of person I would never let into my life again. And when I eventually found someone new, someone who valued loyalty, who understood the meaning of trust, I knew I was walking into something real. But every now and then, I wonder if she ever thinks about that night when she walked into our home and realized it was no longer hers. I wonder if she still checks her phone, hoping for a message from someone who no longer exists in her world. I wonder if she regrets it, if she finally understands what she threw away. Not that it matters, because in the end, she lost everything. And I only lost her. So tell me, was my revenge enough? Or would you have done worse?